The morning air on Viridian 7 tasted like metal and ash. Corporal Han Dae-sung checked his rifle for the third time, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. Around him, the rest of his squad did the same nervous rituals they always did before a mission. Everyone knew something felt wrong about today. The planet was a wasteland caught between two powers fighting for control. On one side stood the Terran Defense Forces, humanity's military arm reaching into the stars. On the other side waited the Krevtar Empire, a warrior race that had controlled this sector for generations. Viridian 7 was just another rock they were bleeding over. Dae-sung served in the 3rd Terran Expeditionary Unit, but they were not fighting alone. Humanity was new to the galactic stage, barely 2 decades since first contact. To fight the Krevtar, Earth had joined a coalition with other alien species. The reptilian Vexra commanded most operations. The insectoid Tharn Collective provided intelligence and logistics. Humans provided bodies. That was the reality nobody said out loud. The aliens treated human soldiers like cheap ammunition. Send them first, let them take the hits, preserve the important troops for later. Dae-sung had seen it mission after mission. Human units always got the worst assignments. Squad leader Lee Taemin walked over, his face tight with worry. He was 10 years older than Dae-sung, a career soldier who had seen too much already. Orders just came through, he said quietly. We are taking point through the grinder. The grinder. Every soldier knew that name. It was a ravine between 2 cliff faces that led straight to the main Krevtar fortification. Intelligence said it was mined and covered by automated defenses. Nobody had made it through yet. Several squads had tried. None came back. That is a suicide run, said Specialist Park Ji-woo, the squad medic. She was younger than Dae-sung, barely 20, with hands that never shook even when treating horrible wounds. We should refuse. Vexri Command says it is reconnaissance in force, Taemin replied. They want to test the defenses before the main assault. They want to spend human lives to save their own, said Private Yoon Hae-sung, the squad sniper. He was the quietest of them all, speaking only when he had something important to say. They always do. Private Kang Byul, their demolitions expert, laughed bitterly. Maybe we will get lucky. Maybe the mines will miss us, nobody else laughed. They all knew luck had nothing to do with it. Dae-sung looked at his squad mates, these people who had become his family over the past year. Taemin, who had taught him how to read Krevtar tactical patterns. Ji-woo, who had pulled him out of a collapsed building during their second mission. Hae-sung, who had saved his life with an impossible shot from 800 meters. By all who made terrible jokes to keep everyone's spirits up. They ate breakfast together in silence. Ration packs that all tasted the same regardless of what the label said. Ji-woo showed them pictures of her younger brother back on Earth. Taemin talked about the farm his family owned in the countryside. Hae-sung mentioned wanting to see the ocean again. Byul made plans for the leave they would take after this operation, knowing they probably would not survive to see it. The alien commanders arrived as the human units assembled. Warcast Siral led the Vexri contingent, his scales gleaming in the harsh morning light. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with eyes that looked at humans the way someone might look at a useful tool. Behind him stood his officers, all watching the human soldiers with barely hidden contempt. Terran units will advance first, Siral announced in his hissing voice. Your objective is to reach the far end of the ravine and establish a position. Hold it until reinforcements arrive. This will allow us to assess enemy strength and response patterns. Taemin stepped forward. Sir, our intelligence shows the ravine is heavily fortified. We will need air support and artillery cover to have any chance of making it through. Your concern is noted, squad leader, Siral said without interest. However, air support might alert the enemy to our full assault plans. Your advance will appear to be a small probing attack. Maintain communications and report what defenses you encounter. And if we encounter overwhelming force, Taemin pressed, then you will have done your duty and provided valuable intelligence. Siral turned away, dismissing them. Move out in 10 minutes, the message was clear. They were meant to trigger the traps, draw the fire, and die learning what waited in that ravine. The aliens would watch from safety and use that information to plan their real attack. As the squad prepared to move out, a Tharn officer approached. Its insect face was unreadable, but its clicking voice held what might have been sympathy. Survival brings honor to the hive, it said to them. May you return. It was more kindness than the Vexri had shown, but it still felt empty. The march to the grinder took 2 hours. The landscape of Viridian 7 was barren and broken, scarred by years of warfare. Craters from orbital bombardment, rusted hulks of destroyed vehicles, the bones of soldiers who had fallen and never been recovered. This whole planet was a graveyard. As they approached the ravine, Dae-sung felt his heart pounding. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for 3 soldiers to walk side by side. The cliffs rose 50 meters on either side, providing perfect positions for enemy guns. The ground was rocky and uneven, perfect for hiding mines. Taemin organized them into formation. He would lead with Biol, using her equipment to detect explosives. Jiwoo would stay in the middle, ready to treat casualties. Haesung would watch the cliffs for threats. Dae-sung and the other riflemen would provide cover. They entered the ravine at 800 hours. For the first 100 meters, nothing happened. Just the sound of boots on stone and everyone's nervous breathing. The cliffs blocked out most of the light, making everything dim and shadowed. Dae-sung kept his rifle ready, checking every shadow for threats. Then Biol's detector started beeping rapidly. "Mines ahead," she called out. "Lots of them. Give me a minute to mark a path." She moved forward carefully, placing small flags to show safe areas to step. It was slow work. Every second felt like an hour. Dae-sung watched the cliff tops, certain he saw movement up there. That was when the first mine exploded. It was not in front of them. It was behind them. Someone had stepped wrong, or the mines were pressure sensitive with a delay. Or maybe they were remotely triggered. It did not matter. The blast threw 2 soldiers backward, their bodies broken. Then the automated turrets opened fire. Energy bolts rained down from positions carved into the cliffs. The Krevtar had set up a perfect kill zone. Soldiers screamed and died around Dae-sung. He threw himself behind a boulder, returning fire at the cliff positions even though he knew his rifle could barely reach that high. "Contact. Heavy contact." Taemin screamed into the radio. "We need support now." "We are being torn apart." More mines exploded. The Krevtar had layered their defenses perfectly. The mines forced soldiers to cluster together, making perfect targets for the turrets. The turrets forced them to spread out, making them hit more mines. There was no winning move. Dae-sung saw Jiwoo running toward a wounded soldier. She made it 3 steps before shrapnel from an explosion caught her in the back. She fell, tried to get up, then fell again and did not move. Haesung found a position and started taking shots at the turrets. His skill was incredible, actually hitting the small targets from an impossible angle. Then a plasma bolt caught him square in the chest. He dropped instantly. Biol was trying to clear a path forward when she stepped on a mine they had not detected. The explosion took both her legs. Her screaming cut through all the other noise. "Evac! We need immediate evac!" Taemin was shouting. "All units fall back. This is a complete ambush." That was when Siral's voice came over the radio, calm and emotionless. "Terran unit has served its purpose. Mission objective achieved. All coalition forces withdraw to secondary positions." Dae-sung looked up through the smoke and chaos. He saw the alien dropships that had been hovering in support range turning away. They were leaving. "Actually leaving, wait!" Taemin screamed. "We have wounded. We need extraction!" "Your sacrifice will be remembered, squad leader," Siral replied. "Fortunes of war. Command out." The radio went silent. The dropships disappeared into the distance, and Han Dae-sung understood with horrible clarity that they had been sent here to die, not to accomplish a mission, not to gather intelligence, simply to trigger the defenses so the aliens could watch what happened from safety. An explosion hit near Taemin. When the smoke cleared, the squad leader was down, blood pooling beneath him. Dae-sung felt something hit his side, felt ribs crack, felt hot pain spreading. His left arm hung wrong, probably broken. All around him were the dead and dying members of his squad, the only family he had known for the past year. Through the smoke, he saw Krevtar warriors emerging from their fortifications. They moved down the ravine methodically, executing wounded humans with precise shots. They were finishing what the mines and turrets had started. Dae-sung collapsed behind the boulder, his vision going dark at the edges. Above him, the alien dropships were gone. Below him, his squad was gone. And in front of him, death was walking closer. He closed. Dae-sung lay still, barely breathing. Blood soaked through his uniform from the shrapnel wound in his side. His left arm screamed with pain every time he moved. Through slitted eyes, he watched the Krevtar warriors moving through the ravine. They were efficient and professional about their killing. No anger, no hatred, Just soldiers completing a task. A wounded human would cry out or try to crawl away, and a plasma bolt would end it quickly. The Krevtar seemed to view it as a mercy, putting down enemies who could not be saved. One warrior approached Daesung's position. He was huge, over 2 meters tall, with dark gray skin covered in ritual scars. His armor was well maintained, showing the pride of a career soldier. He carried a plasma rifle that looked almost small in his massive hands. Daesung held his breath. He was covered in blood from his wounds and from the soldiers who had died near him. His eyes were barely open, his body limp. He looked dead. He had to look dead. The Krevtar stood over him for what felt like forever. Daesung could hear the alien's breathing, slow and controlled. Could smell something like cinnamon and copper. Could feel the warrior's eyes examining him. Then the Krevtar made a sound, something between a growl and a sigh. He said something in his own language, words Daesung did not understand. The warrior moved on to check the next body. Daesung waited 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours. The sounds of the Krevtar warriors grew more distant as they moved back toward their fortifications. They had confirmed all the human soldiers were dead or dying. Their job was done. Only then did Daesung dare to move. Pain exploded through his body as he shifted position. His side felt like it was on fire. His broken arm dangled uselessly. But he was alive. Against all logic and probability, he was alive. He looked around at what remained of his squad. Taemin lay 15 meters away, his eyes staring at nothing. Jiwoo was crumpled where she had fallen trying to help someone. Haesung had died instantly from that plasma shot. Byul had stopped screaming, bleeding out from her wounds. All of them dead. 23 human soldiers had entered this ravine. Daesung appeared to be the only survivor, and he was not sure he would stay that way for long. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the ravine. Daesung knew he had to move before darkness fell completely. The Krevtar might return to collect their own dead or retrieve equipment. He could not be here when they did. Using his good arm, he pulled himself toward a destroyed section of the cliff wall. An artillery strike or bombing run had collapsed part of it at some point, creating a small cave-like space filled with rubble. It was not much, but it would provide cover. Every meter was agony. He left a trail of blood behind him but could do nothing about it. His broken ribs grated with each breath. His side felt wet and hot. The shrapnel wound still bleeding. He wanted to stop, to rest, to just give up. But something inside him refused to quit. Some stubborn core that would not accept death. It took him 30 minutes to crawl 50 meters. By the time he reached the rubble pile, he was gasping and sweating despite the cooling evening air. He pulled himself into the small space between broken rocks and collapsed against the back wall. For several minutes, he just focused on breathing. In and out. Staying conscious. Not dying. Then he forced himself to assess his injuries. The shrapnel in his side was the worst. He could feel at least 2 pieces of metal embedded in his flesh. His left arm was definitely broken, the bone bent at an unnatural angle. He had cuts and bruises all over, but those were minor compared to the serious wounds. He needed medical supplies. Looking around the ravine, he spotted several corpses he might reach without exposing himself to view from the fortifications. Slowly, carefully, he crawled back out of his hiding spot. The first body was a soldier named Kim Han-sol. They had shared a tent back at base. Daesung tried not to look at his face as he went through the man's gear. Medical kit, water bottle half full, energy bars. He took everything useful and crawled to the next body. It took him 2 hours to visit 5 corpses gathering supplies. By the end, he had 3 medical kits, some water, a little food, and 1 working communications unit. He also found a pistol with half a charge pack remaining. Better than nothing. Back in his hiding spot, Daesung used the medical supplies to treat himself as best he could. He injected himself with antibiotics and pain medication. He used surgical glue to close the worst cuts. The shrapnel in his side was too deep to remove safely, so he left it in and covered the wound with synthetic skin patches. His arm he splinted using pieces of armor plating and medical tape. The pain medication helped, but he still felt like death. His head swam with fever or blood loss or both. But he was stable, or as stable as he could make himself. Then he tried the communications unit. The first several channels were dead. The coalition forces must have changed frequencies after pulling out. Finally, he found an active command channel. He recognized the clicking voice of a Tharn officer named Hive Node Rixal. "This is Corporal Han Daesung, 3rd Terran Expeditionary. Requesting immediate evacuation, he said. His voice hoarse, there was a long pause. Then Rixall responded, sounding confused. Corporal Han Dae-sung is listed as killed in action. This channel is reserved for active personnel only. I am not dead, Dae-sung said, anger cutting through his pain. I am wounded and trapped in hostile territory. I need evac now. Another pause. He heard clicking in the background. Probably Rixall consulting records. Our database shows all members of your squad as casualties. The mission was completed hours ago. Are you certain you are Corporal Han Dae-sung? Yes, I am alive. Send a ship. That would require authorization from command, Rixall said, and would expose our forces to unnecessary risk for a recovery operation. I will file a report of this communication for review. Wait, do not. The channel went dead. They had disconnected him. Dae-sung stared at the communications unit in disbelief. They were not coming. Even knowing he was alive, they were not coming. The mission was over. The intelligence was gathered. One surviving human soldier was not worth the risk of sending a ship into Krevtar-controlled airspace. He wanted to scream. He wanted to throw the communications unit against the rocks. He wanted to rage at the unfairness of it all. But what good would that do? Nobody was coming to save him. Nobody cared if he lived or died. He was already listed as dead in their records. They had moved on. The realization settled over him like a heavy weight. He was completely alone in enemy territory. He was wounded, low on supplies and at least 50 kilometers from the nearest coalition position. The Krevtar controlled everything between here and there. Any rational person would give up, would find a comfortable place to lie down and let death come peacefully, would accept that some situations are unwinnable. But Dae-sung had never been particularly rational, and something inside him burned hotter than any fever. It was not just about surviving anymore. It was about proving them wrong. All of them. The aliens who had left humans to die. The commanders who had written him off. The system that treated human lives as expendable. He would not die here. He would not let them forget what they had done. He would walk out of this wasteland if it killed him, and when he did, everyone would know what happened in this ravine. Through the darkness, Dae-sung looked toward the Krevtar fortifications. Lights blazed there, marking guard towers and defensive positions. Somewhere in that base was the commander who had ordered the defenses that killed his squad, the warrior who had created this kill zone. An idea began forming in Dae-sung's pain-clouded mind. It was insane. It was impossible. But then again, he was already supposed to be dead. What did he have to lose? He needed to send a message. Not just to the Coalition, but to every species in the galaxy. A message about what happens when you abandon humans. About what a single human soldier could do when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. And to send that message, he needed a trophy. Something unmistakable. Something that would prove he had done the impossible. He needed to take something from the enemy commander himself. The pain medication was making him dizzy. His fever was rising despite the antibiotics. He knew he was probably delirious, thinking crazy thoughts brought on by trauma and infection. But the idea would not leave him. If he was going to die anyway, he might as well die doing something legendary. Dae-sung checked his stolen pistol. Half a charge left. Maybe 20 shots. He looked at his broken body, held together by medical tape and stubborn will. He thought about his dead squad mates left to rot in this forsaken ravine. I will make them remember you, he whispered to the darkness. I promise. Then he closed his eyes and tried to rest. Tomorrow, if he survived the night, he would start planning. He would scout the Krevtar base. He would learn their patterns. He would find a way, because that was what humans did. They survived. They endured. And when the galaxy pushed them down, they got back up and pushed harder. The night was cold and filled with pain, but Han Dae-sung was still breathing, still thinking, still fighting. That would have to be enough. Morning came slowly to the ravine. Dae-sung woke to find himself still alive, which was both surprising and disappointing. The pain had not decreased overnight. If anything, it had gotten worse. His whole body felt like one massive bruise with bones poking through in wrong places. He forced himself to move anyway. Staying still meant dying, and he had made a promise to himself and his dead friends. He would get out of here. He would make their deaths mean something. The first challenge was water. He had collected some from dead soldiers yesterday, but not nearly enough. The human body could survive weeks without food, but only days without water. In this heat, maybe less than that. Dae-sung crawled to the edge of his hiding spot and looked around carefully. The Krevtar had not returned during the night. The ravine looked empty except for the bodies. But he knew there would be sensors, maybe automated defenses still active. He had to move carefully. He spent an hour just observing, watching for patterns, looking for any sign of surveillance. The Krevtar fortification sat at the far end of the ravine, maybe 300 meters away. Too far to see details, but he could make out guard towers and defensive walls. Finally, he decided it was as safe as it would ever be. He crawled out to collect more supplies from the fallen soldiers. It felt wrong looting the dead like this. These were his brothers and sisters, people he had served with. But they did not need water anymore, and he did. He found 6 more bottles scattered among the dead. Not much, but enough for maybe 3 days if he was careful. He also found more ration packs and another medical kit. Every supply mattered now. As he crawled back to cover, he heard something that made him freeze. Voices, speaking in the Krevtar language. He pressed himself flat against the rocky ground, barely breathing. 3 Krevtar warriors entered the ravine. They moved with casual confidence like people visiting a place they controlled completely. They were talking to each other, their voices a mix of growls and sharp consonants. Dae-sung understood none of it, but their tone sounded almost relaxed. They walked past him less than 10 meters away. He could have reached out and touched them. But they were not looking for survivors. Why would they? Everyone knew humans who entered the grinder died here. It was a certainty, like gravity or sunrise. The warriors inspected some of the bodies, probably checking for useful equipment or intelligence. One of them stopped near where Dae-sung had been yesterday. The warrior looked at the blood trail leading toward the rubble, then shrugged and moved on. Probably thought a wounded soldier had crawled away to die somewhere hidden. They were not wrong. Dae-sung was dying, just more slowly than they expected. After the patrol left, Dae-sung allowed himself to breathe again. His heart was pounding so hard he worried they might hear it. But he had learned something important. The Krevtar were not worried about this area. They considered it secure. That was useful information. Over the next 2 days, Dae-sung established a routine. During daylight hours, he hid in his rebel shelter and observed the Krevtar base. At night, when darkness provided cover, he would carefully move around the ravine collecting supplies and scouting possible escape routes. His wounds were not healing well. Despite the antibiotics, infection had set in around the shrapnel wounds. His fever came and went in waves. Sometimes he felt almost clear-headed. Other times he hallucinated, seeing his dead squad mates standing around him asking why he had survived when they had not. But the fever also brought a strange clarity at times. His mind would drift, making connections he normally would not see. And during one of these fever dreams, he started really understanding the Krevtar. He watched their patrols from his hiding spot. The same warriors passed by at the same times each day. Their movements were precise, almost ritualistic. Everything they did followed patterns. That was a warrior culture for you. They valued discipline and honor and doing things the right way. From his position, Dae-sung could see part of their base. He watched how they organized guard shifts, how they maintained equipment, how they trained. They were good soldiers, professional and skilled, but they were also predictable. On the 3rd day, Dae-sung saw something interesting. A Krevtar warrior in different armor emerged from the base. While most Krevtar wore standard gray armor, this one wore deep crimson with gold markings. On his head sat an ornate helmet, bright red with curved horns or decorations that caught the sunlight. Other Krevtar stopped what they were doing when this warrior passed. They made gestures that looked like salutes or signs of respect. Even from this distance, Dae-sung could tell this was someone important. He watched the Crimson Warrior inspect defensive positions. The way he moved, the way others responded to him, everything marked him as the commander. This was the one who had designed the defenses that killed Dae-sung's squad, the one who had turned the grinder into a death trap, and he wore that bright crimson helmet like a crown. Dae-sung stared at that helmet for a long time. An idea that had been forming in his fevered brain suddenly became crystal clear. That helmet was his message. That helmet was his proof. That helmet would show the entire galaxy what one human soldier could accomplish when they refused to die. It was insane. He knew it was insane. He was one wounded man against an entire military base. He could barely walk without collapsing. His weapons were a half-charged pistol and whatever he could scavenge. His armor was torn and blood-soaked. He had maybe 2 days of water left and his infection was getting worse. But humans had never been known for accepting impossible odds gracefully. They were known for being too stupid or too stubborn to know when they were beaten. Dae-sung spent the next day watching the commander. He learned the Krevtar's routine. Morning inspection of the outer defenses. Midday reviewing something on data terminals inside the base. Afternoon training with his warriors. Evening walking the perimeter alone, checking guard positions personally. That evening walk was interesting. For about 30 minutes the commander would move around the base's edge without escorts. The other Krevtar stayed at their posts, showing respect by giving their leader space. Or maybe it was an honor thing, showing the commander trusted them enough to do their jobs without supervision. Whatever the reason, it meant there was a window. A brief time when the commander was alone and somewhat exposed. It was still inside their controlled territory, still surrounded by guards at other positions. But it was the closest thing to vulnerable Dae-sung would ever find. He had 4 days, 5 at most. After that, his water would run out or his infection would kill him or he would simply collapse from exhaustion. The human body could only endure so much, so he had to make his move soon. Tomorrow night, or the night after at latest. One last desperate gamble by a man who was already dead. Dae-sung spent that evening preparing. He organized his supplies, keeping only what he could carry quietly. The pistol, 2 spare energy cells he had scavenged, his combat knife, some medical supplies, 1 smoke grenade with a cracked casing that might or might not work, his dog tags, the metal ones that identified him as Corporal Han Dae-sung, Terran Defense Forces. He wrote a message on a piece of cloth torn from his uniform, using blood as ink. Just a few words. They left us. We did not leave each other. He tucked it into his armor over his heart. If he died, maybe someone would find it someday. Maybe someone would care. As darkness fell, Dae-sung tried to sleep. He needed rest for what was coming, but his mind would not quiet. He kept seeing faces. Taimin laughing at one of Byul's terrible jokes. Jiwoo concentrating as she treated a wound. Haesung's rare smile when he made an impossible shot. All gone now. All dead in a ravine that nobody would remember, except as a successful intelligence-gathering operation for the Coalition. Their lives reduced to data points in a mission report. Dae-sung felt anger burning through the fever. Not at the Krevtar for fighting their war. They were just soldiers like him, following orders and doing their duty. His anger was for the Coalition commanders who had sent humans to die, for the Vexri who had watched from safety while humans bled, for every alien who thought human lives were cheaper than their own. He would show them. One way or another, he would show them what humans were capable of. What happened when you pushed them past every reasonable limit? What happened when you left them for dead? Tomorrow night he would do the impossible. He would infiltrate an enemy base. He would approach their commander. And he would take that crimson helmet as proof, or he would die trying. Either way, his struggle would end soon. Dae-sung closed his eyes and let the fever take him into uneasy dreams. He dreamed of Earth, of home, of a life he would probably never see again. He dreamed of his squad, all of them together and laughing. He dreamed of walking out of this wasteland carrying a crimson helmet, while the whole galaxy watched in shock. When he woke, it was dawn. His 4th day alive in the grinder. His last day as a forgotten casualty of war. Tomorrow, one way or another, the galaxy would remember his name. The sun beat down mercilessly on Viridian 7. Dae-sung spent the day in his shelter, conserving energy and watching the Krevtar base. His fever had spiked again during the night, leaving him shaky and weak. The infected wounds throbbed with each heartbeat. His broken arm ached despite the splint. He should be dead already. By all logic and medical science, his body should have given up. But humans were built different from most species. Evolution had shaped them on a harsh world, creating creatures that could run prey to death through sheer endurance. That could heal from terrible wounds. That refused to quit even when quitting made more sense. Dae-sung was living proof of that stubborn biology. His body was fighting the infection, fighting the pain, fighting death itself with every cell. It would not be enough forever, but it might be enough for one more night. As evening approached, he watched the Krevtar commander make his rounds. The crimson helmet gleamed in the fading light. The warrior moved with confidence and purpose, checking each guard post personally. He spoke to his soldiers, probably words of encouragement or instruction. A good commander taking care of his troops. Dae-sung almost felt bad about what he was planning to do. Almost. Then he remembered Tae-min's body lying in the ravine. Remembered Ji-woo trying to help others even as she bled out. Remembered all of them. Abandoned and left to rot because they were human and therefore expendable. The guilt vanished, replaced by cold determination. When full darkness fell, Dae-sung prepared himself. He drank half his remaining water, ate an energy bar, injected himself with the last of his pain medication and stimulants. The drugs would keep him moving for a few hours, pushing his body past its natural limits. After that, he would crash hard. But he only needed a few hours. He checked his pistol. 18 shots remaining in the charge pack. His knife was sharp. The smoke grenade might work. His body was held together with medical tape and willpower. It would have to be enough. Leaving his shelter felt like leaving safety behind forever. The night air was cold against his skin. Every sound seemed too loud. His boots on stone. His breathing. His racing heartbeat. But the darkness also provided cover, and Dae-sung had trained for night operations. Moving through no man's land between the ravine and the Krevtar base took over an hour. He had to crawl most of the way, staying below sensor lines. His wounds screamed with every movement. Twice he had to stop and wait for patrols to pass nearby. But eventually he reached the outer perimeter. The Krevtar had sensors and automated defenses, but they were focused outward, watching for attacks from coalition territory. They were not expecting someone to approach from the grinder. Why would they? Everyone who entered that ravine died there. Dae-sung found a blind spot in the sensor net, a place where two coverage zones did not quite overlap. It was barely wide enough for his body, and he had to move with painful slowness, but he made it through. Now he was inside their perimeter. Inside enemy territory proper. If they discovered him now, there would be no escape. No second chances, just a quick death. Probably considered a mercy for a wounded enemy soldier. The base was larger than it had looked from distance. Prefabricated buildings and defensive structures spread across the rocky ground. Guard towers at each corner. Automated weapon systems covering the approaches. Krevtar soldiers moving between positions on their assigned patrols. Everything was orderly and efficient. A professional military installation. Dae-sung studied the patterns from his hiding spot behind a supply container. The guards changed shifts every 4 hours. Patrols followed set routes timed to meet at intersection points. Lights illuminated most areas, leaving few shadows, but there were shadows. Small gaps in their coverage. Places where containers or vehicles blocked the light. Paths that, if timed perfectly, could be traversed without being seen. Dae-sung waited for the right moment. His body wanted to collapse. The stimulants were wearing off already, leaving him shaky. But he focused on the goal. The commander's quarters were in the center of the base, a larger building with guards at the entrance. He could not get inside there, but he did not need to. The commander would come out eventually for his evening inspection. Dae-sung just had to be patient. 2 hours passed. Dae-sung stayed hidden behind the container, barely moving. At one point, a Krevtar soldier walked within 2 meters of his position. He held his breath, pressing himself flat against the cold metal. The soldier never looked his way, just continued on patrol. Finally, the door to the command building opened. The crimson helmet emerged, catching the light. The commander stepped out, stretching his massive arms like someone who had been sitting at a desk too long. He said something to the guards, who responded with respect but stayed at their posts. Then he walked alone toward the perimeter, beginning his inspection rounds. Dae-sung's heart pounded. This was it. This was his chance. He moved from his hiding spot, following the commander from a distance, staying in shadows, using containers and vehicles for cover. His body screamed protest at every movement, but the stimulants and adrenaline pushed him forward. The commander walked the perimeter, stopping at each guard post. The routine was the same each time. He would speak to the guards, check their equipment, look out at the dark wasteland beyond, then move to the next position. Dae-sung followed like a ghost. Several times he had to freeze as guards looked his way. Once he had to hide under a transport vehicle as a patrol passed overhead. But the Krevtar were not expecting threats inside their own base. Their attention was focused outward. The commander reached the southern perimeter, the side closest to the grinder. This was the last guard post on his route. After this, he would turn back toward the command building. It was now or never. Dae-sung waited until the commander finished talking to the guards, watched him turn away, heading back along a path that ran between two storage buildings. The path was darker than most of the base, lit by only a single pole light. This was the moment. Dae-sung's whole body trembled. From fever, from exhaustion, from fear, but also from determination. He thought of his squad one last time. Then he moved. He emerged from shadow and approached the commander from behind. His boots made no sound on the rocky ground. The Krevtar was massive, over 2 meters tall and built like a tank. In a fair fight, he would crush Dae-sung without effort. But Dae-sung was not interested in fair fights. He was a wounded, desperate man who had nothing left to lose. He covered the last 3 meters in a rush, jumping onto the commander's back, his good arm wrapped around the warrior's throat. His legs locked around the massive torso. He squeezed with every bit of strength remaining in his body. The commander made a startled sound, hands reaching up to grab his attacker. But Dae-sung's position was good and surprise was on his side. The Krevtar tried to throw him off, spinning and backing into a wall. Pain exploded through Dae-sung's broken ribs, but he held on. They struggled in silence. The commander could not call out without losing honor, attacked inside his own base by a single enemy. Dae-sung could not make noise without bringing every guard running. It was a desperate, quiet battle in the shadows. Dae-sung felt his strength fading. The commander was too strong, too skilled. In seconds, he would break free and end this. But Dae-sung's hand found what he was looking for. The release mechanism on the helmet hidden under the warrior's jaw. He pulled it. Pulled with everything he had left. The helmet's seal broke with a hiss of escaping air. With his last bit of strength, Dae-sung yanked the crimson helmet free. The commander threw him off finally, sending him crashing to the ground. The helmet flew from his grip, landing 3 meters away. Both human and Krevtar lay there for a moment, gasping. Then the commander rose to his feet. His face was visible now, scarred and fierce. He looked down at Dae-sung with eyes that burned with anger, but also something else. Surprise. Maybe even respect. "You are the one from the ravine," the commander said in heavily accented human language. "You should be dead, soldier." "Not dead yet," Dae-sung gasped. He crawled toward the helmet, ignoring his body's screams. The commander watched him. Could have called the guards. Could have killed him easily, but he just stood there, watching this broken human drag himself across the ground to claim his prize. "You fight with no honor," the commander said, attacking from behind. "In darkness. Your people killed my squad," Dae-sung said, reaching the helmet. His fingers closed around it. "My friends, my family. That is war," the commander replied. "They died as warriors. You should accept this." Dae-sung pulled himself to his knees, clutching the crimson helmet to his chest. Blood dripped from his reopened wounds. His vision swam with pain and exhaustion. But he had it. He actually had it. "I accept nothing," he said. "I was left to die by my own allies. So I will live anyway, and I will walk out of here with your crown, and everyone will know what happened." The commander tilted his head, studying this insane human. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. A deep rumbling sound. "You are dead, human," he said, "but you died a warrior. That is more honor than most achieve." Dae-sung pulled the smoke grenade from his belt, the cracked one that might not work. "Not dead yet," he repeated. He activated it and threw it at the ground. For a moment nothing happened, and Dae-sung thought his luck had finally run out. Then smoke burst from the grenade, thick and choking, filling the space between them. Alarms screamed through the Krevtar base. Lights blazed everywhere as the entire compound went to full alert. Dae-sung ran through the smoke, clutching the crimson helmet against his chest like it was the most precious thing in the universe. Because right now it was. Behind him he heard the commander's voice roaring orders in the Krevtar language. The words were foreign, but the meaning was clear. "Find the human, stop him. Bring back the helmet." Dae-sung's body was failing. The stimulants had worn off completely, leaving him running on nothing but adrenaline and stubbornness. His legs felt like lead. His lungs burned. Every breath sent sharp pains through his broken ribs. The infected wounds leaked blood with each step, but he kept moving. Through the smoke, between buildings, using every bit of cover he could find. Soldiers rushed past him in the chaos, not yet organized enough to establish a proper search pattern. That would not last long. The Krevtar were professional warriors. They would organize quickly. He made it to the perimeter fence, the same place he had entered. The sensors he had avoided before were now on full alert. Automated weapons tracked movement. Guards were taking positions, no choice. He had to go over. Dae-sung threw the helmet over the fence first, then climbed. His broken arm made it nearly impossible, but impossible had stopped meaning anything to him days ago. He pulled himself up using his good arm and his legs, ignoring the pain, ignoring everything except the need to keep moving. Plasma bolts sizzled past him as guards spotted his movement. He dropped to the other side of the fence just as weapons fire tore through the space he had occupied, hit the ground hard, rolled, grabbed the helmet, ran into the darkness of no man's land. Behind him, the base was a storm of activity. Lights swept the wasteland. More alarms. Shouted orders. The Krevtar were mobilizing their full force for one human soldier and a stolen helmet. Dae-sung ran into the Badlands, putting distance between himself and the base. His body wanted to collapse. His mind screamed that he could not keep going. But he did anyway. That was what humans did. They kept going past the point where any reasonable species would quit. After a kilometer, he allowed himself to stop and look back. The base blazed with light. He could see vehicles moving out, beginning the hunt. They would come after him. He had known they would. This was not just about catching an escaped enemy. This was about honor. The commander had been humiliated, inside his own base, by a supposedly dead human. The crimson helmet was not just a piece of equipment. It was a symbol of rank and authority. Its theft was an insult that demanded response. They would hunt Dae-sung across the entire planet if necessary. They would never stop until they recovered it or confirmed his death. Good. Let them come. He would make them work for it. Dae-sung strapped the helmet to his pack and started moving again. Not running now, but walking with purpose. Conserving energy. The Krevtar would catch up eventually with their vehicles and organize search parties. But humans had evolved as endurance hunters. They could outlast anything over distance. The Badlands of Viridian 7 stretched out in all directions. Rocky ground broken by ravines and hills. No water sources. No vegetation. Nothing but stone and sand and the occasional ruins of previous battles. It was terrible territory for hiding, but perfect for endurance tests. Dae-sung walked through the night. Behind him, he saw searchlights sweeping the darkness. Heard the sounds of vehicles and soldiers spreading out to find him. The Krevtar were thorough and professional. But they were also heavy and loud. He could hear them coming from kilometers away. When dawn came, Dae-sung was 10 kilometers from the base. He found a ravine with an overhanging ledge and hid beneath it. The position gave him cover from aerial searches and a good view of anyone approaching from the ground. He allowed himself to rest then. Just for a few hours. His body desperately needed it. He drank his last water, ate his last energy bar. The helmet sat next to him, crimson and beautiful in the morning light. It was real. He had actually done it. A single human soldier, wounded and abandoned, had infiltrated an enemy base and taken a trophy from their commander. It was insane, impossible. The kind of story people would dismiss as propaganda if they heard it, but it was real. And he was not done yet. The Krevtar search parties moved through the area all morning. Dae-sung watched them from his hiding spot. They were organized into groups of 5, each covering a grid section. Professional and thorough, but they were looking for someone hiding, someone cowering in fear. They were not expecting someone who kept moving, someone who refused to stay down. When afternoon came and the search parties moved past his position, Dae-sung started walking again, heading northeast toward the distant coalition territory, 50 kilometers away, maybe more, an impossible distance for someone in his condition. But impossible was just another word for difficult. And difficult was something humans specialized in. The second night was worse than the first. His water was gone. The infection was spreading despite the antibiotics. His fever spiked so high he started seeing things. Dead squad mates walking beside him. The commander following with glowing eyes. The stars spinning above in impossible patterns, but his legs kept moving. Step after step after step. That was what humans did on Earth when hunting prey. They walked it down, followed it for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. Persistence hunting, it was called. The most human way to kill something. Now the roles were reversed. The Krevtar were hunting him, but he would make them understand what it meant to hunt a human. On the third day of his escape, Dae-sung collapsed. Not from giving up. His body simply stopped working. He fell in a rocky area with no cover, the helmet still strapped to his back. He lay there, unable to move, watching the sky. He had made it 30 kilometers from the base. 20 more to go, so close. But his body had nothing left to give. No water, no food. The infection was everywhere now. His wounds had reopened from the constant movement. He was dying, finally and truly. A Krevtar patrol found him 2 hours later. 5 warriors, heavily armed, following his trail. They approached carefully, weapons ready. Then they saw what he was and stopped in confusion. One human, alone, still breathing but clearly dying, and still clutching their commander's helmet. The patrol leader, a scarred veteran, stared at Daesung for a long moment. Then he spoke into his communications device, probably calling for orders. Daesung could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. Respect, confusion, maybe even admiration. The patrol stood guard over him but made no move to finish him off. They just waited. After 30 minutes, a vehicle arrived. The commander himself stepped out, now wearing a plain helmet instead of his crimson one. He walked to where Daesung lay and looked down at him. "You should be dead 3 times over, human," he said in that accented standard language. "What makes you continue?" "Stubbornness," Daesung whispered through cracked lips. "Human specialty." The commander made that rumbling laugh again. "You are a warrior." "Insane, but a warrior." He looked at the helmet strapped to Daesung's back. "You have earned that trophy. You walked 30 kilometers through hostile territory, dying rather than abandon it. That is warrior spirit," he gestured to his troops. They carefully lifted Daesung and placed him in the vehicle. Still made no move to take the helmet back. "We take you to the border," the commander said. "You have proven human determination. Your coalition should know what their abandoned soldier achieved, should know what you're capable of." Daesung tried to protest, but the commander cut him off. "This is about honor. You challenged me, you won. The trophy is yours. But I will not let you die in the sand like a broken animal. You will return to your people. You will show them what you took, and they will understand what it means to leave humans for dead." The vehicle started moving. Daesung's vision faded in and out. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was the commander standing in the wasteland, watching the vehicle drive away. When he woke again, he was lying at a coalition checkpoint. The Krevtar had left him at the border and departed. Coalition soldiers stood around him in shock, staring at the wounded man who should have been dead, and at the crimson helmet still strapped to his back. Someone called for a medic. Someone else was shouting into a radio. Daesung heard fragments. "It is Corporal Han Daesung. Yes, the one listed as key. I do not know how. You need to see this helmet." He smiled through the pain and fever. He had done it. Walked out of hell, carrying proof of the impossible. His vision went dark, but he could die happy now. He had made them remember. Daesung woke to white walls and the smell of disinfectant. Medical bay. He was in a medical bay. For a moment he panicked, thinking he had dreamed everything. The escape. The helmet. All of it just fever hallucinations as he died in the ravine. Then he saw the crimson helmet sitting on a table next to his bed. Real. Solid. Proof. "You are finally awake," a voice said. A human doctor, an older woman with gray hair, stood at the foot of his bed checking monitors. "You have been unconscious for 3 days. We were worried the fever would not break." "I am alive?" Daesung's voice was rough from disuse. "Barely. Your wounds were severely infected. You had lost dangerous amounts of blood. Your body was shutting down from exhaustion and dehydration." She shook her head in disbelief. "By every medical standard, you should have died days ago. But human stubbornness apparently counts for more than medical science." Daesung tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his entire body. The doctor gently pushed him back down. "Easy. You have broken ribs, a fractured arm, multiple infected wounds, and your body needs time to recover. You are not going anywhere for a while." "My squad?" he asked, even though he knew the answer. The doctor's face fell. "I am sorry. You were the only survivor from the grinder operation. All other personnel are confirmed casualties." The words hit harder than expected, even though he had known, had seen them die, had left their bodies in that ravine. But hearing it officially made it real in a new way. "How long have I been listed as dead?" he asked. 8 days. You were declared killed in action the same day as the mission. No search and rescue was attempted because all units were reported as confirmed casualties. She paused, then added quietly, "Until you walked out of there carrying that." She nodded at the helmet. News of his return had apparently spread. Throughout the medical bay, other personnel kept finding excuses to walk past his room, stealing glances at the infamous soldier and his trophy. Over the next few days, as Dae-sung slowly recovered, he learned what his return had caused. The story had spread through the coalition forces like fire. A human soldier, abandoned and left for dead, surviving against impossible odds and returning with the enemy commander's helmet. It was the kind of tale that became legend, but it also raised uncomfortable questions. Why had the human units been ordered into an obvious kill zone? Why was no rescue attempted when they called for help? Why were they declared dead without verification? Human diplomatic representatives were demanding answers. The abandonment of Terran troops was becoming a major incident. The alien species who had treated humans as expendable were now facing political consequences. On the 5th day after his return, Dae-sung received visitors. Warcast Siral entered his medical room, accompanied by 2 Vexry officers and a Tharn coordinator. Siral looked uncomfortable, his scales darker than usual. "Corporal Han," Siral began formally, "on behalf of Coalition Command, I wish to express our satisfaction at your survival. Your resilience is commendable." Dae-sung stared at him with cold eyes. "You left us to die. Battlefield decisions require difficult choices. You watched us get slaughtered and did nothing. Then you refused to send help when I called for evac." Dae-sung's voice was quiet but sharp as broken glass. "My squad mates died because you sent us into a kill zone without support. I survived because I was lucky, not because of anything you did." Siral's eyes flickered. "The mission parameters? The mission was to sacrifice human lives so you could gather intelligence safely." Dae-sung sat up despite the pain, meeting the towering alien's gaze. "You used us as bait. Expendable bait. Because we are human and therefore worth less than Vexry or Tharn." The room fell silent. The accusation hung in the air, ugly and impossible to deny. The Tharn coordinator, Hive Node Rixal, clicked nervously. There were strategic considerations. "Command decisions are complex. Command decisions killed my friends," Dae-sung said flatly, "and would have killed me if I had been reasonable enough to accept death." Before anyone could respond, the door opened again. General Im Soo-jin entered, commander of all Terran forces in this sector. She was a compact woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many soldiers die. Behind her came several human officers and a delegation of coalition oversight personnel. The room suddenly felt very crowded. "Warcast Siral," General Im said coldly. "Step away from my soldier." Siral moved aside, his discomfort increasing. General Im walked to Dae-sung's bedside and looked him over with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades in military service. "Corporal Han Dae-sung," she said formally, "what you accomplished is remarkable. Not just surviving, but what you achieved while surviving." She gestured at the crimson helmet. "May I?" Dae-sung nodded. The general picked up the helmet, examining it carefully. Then she turned to face the assembled alien officers, holding it up for all to see. "This," she said, her voice carrying absolute authority, "is what one human soldier accomplished alone. Wounded, abandoned by his supposed allies, given up for dead by his own command. He infiltrated an enemy base, took a trophy from their commander, and walked 30 kilometers through hostile territory while dying." She placed the helmet on the table with deliberate care. "Now imagine what human soldiers could accomplish if you actually supported us. If you treated our lives as having value equal to your own. If you saw us as true allies instead of expendable resources." "General Im," Siral began, "I understand your anger, but you understand nothing." The general's voice could have cut steel. "For months you have been sending human units on suicide missions, using our soldiers as cannon fodder. When Corporal Han called for evacuation, he was refused, not because extraction was impossible, but because one human life was not worth the effort in your eyes." She stepped closer to Siral, despite being less than half his height. "That ends now. Either we are full members of this coalition with equal consideration, or we withdraw our forces entirely. Choose." The alien officers shifted uncomfortably. The political implications were clear. Humans provided nearly 40% of the coalition's ground forces. Losing them would cripple offensive operations. The Coalition values all member species, Rixal said carefully. Perhaps certain operational protocols require review. More than review, General Im said. Complete restructuring. Human officers will have equal command authority. No unit, human or otherwise, will be designated as expendable. All rescue operations will be attempted regardless of species. These are not negotiable terms. She turned back to Dae-sung. You have been promoted to sergeant, effective immediately. You will also receive the Terran Star of Valor, our highest military honor. The ceremony will be broadcast to all coalition forces. She paused, then added more quietly, I am sorry about your squad. Sorry that our supposed allies failed them. Failed you. Dae-sung looked at the crimson helmet. They did not die for nothing, did they? No, Sergeant. Because of what happened, things will change. We will make sure of it. After the visitors left, Dae-sung sat alone with his thoughts. The promotion in metal felt hollow. Taemin, Jiwoo, Haesung, Byal, all the others. They were still dead. No amount of political change would bring them back, but maybe their deaths would mean something now. Maybe other human soldiers would not be abandoned. Maybe the next squad sent into danger would actually receive support. It was small comfort, but it was something. A young private appeared at his door, looking nervous. Sergeant Han, I just wanted to say, what you did, it matters to all of us. Every human in the coalition. You showed them what we are capable of. After the private left, more soldiers came. Human and surprisingly some aliens too. A Vexry sergeant who saluted respectfully. A Tharn worker who offered clicking sounds that might have been admiration. They had heard the story. The abandoned soldier who refused to die. The human who walked out of hell carrying proof of the impossible. Dae-sung realized he had become a symbol, not just of survival, but of human determination. Of what happens when you push humans past every limit and they still refuse to quit. He looked at the crimson helmet one more time before closing his eyes to rest. Tomorrow, he would attend ceremonies and deal with the political aftermath. But tonight he would remember his squad. Honor their memory. Make sure their names were not forgotten. Lee Taemin, Park Ji-woo, Yoon Hae-sung, Kang Byul, and 19 others who had died in the grinder. They had not survived, but through Dae-sung's stubborn refusal to die, they would be remembered. The galaxy would know their names, would understand what happened when you treated human lives as disposable. It was not enough. It would never be enough, but it was something, and sometimes something was all you could hope for. 3 weeks passed before the doctors cleared Dae-sung for release. His wounds had healed slowly but steadily. The infection was finally gone. His broken bones were mending. The human body was remarkably good at recovering when given proper medical care and time. But some wounds went deeper than flesh. Dae-sung slept poorly, waking from nightmares about the grinder, about watching his friends die, about the moment he realized they had been abandoned. The doctors said it was normal. That trauma took time to process. They offered medications and counseling. He took the counseling but refused the medications. He wanted to feel everything, even the pain. It felt wrong to numb himself when his squad mates were gone. Survivor's guilt, the counselor called it. Dae-sung called it justice. He survived when they did not. The least he could do was remember clearly. On the day of his release, a ceremony was held. Dae-sung stood in his dress uniform, uncomfortable with the attention. Hundreds of soldiers attended, both human and alien. General Im pinned the Terran Star of Valor to his chest, while cameras recorded everything for broadcast across Coalition space. The medal felt heavy. Heavier than it should have been. It represented valor, but also the deaths of 23 people who deserved medals just as much. After the ceremony, Dae-sung walked to the memorial wall where fallen soldiers were honored. Names were etched into black stone, organized by unit and date. He found his squad section easily. 23 names. 23 people who had entered the grinder and never came home. Lee Taemin, Park Ji-woo, Yoon Hae-sung, Kang Byul. All of them listed there forever. Dae-sung traced his fingers over the engraved letters, feeling the depth of each name. They were my family, he said quietly to no one in particular. Better family than blood sometimes is. All soldiers understand this feeling, a rough voice said behind him. Dae-sung turned. A Krevtar stood there in formal military attire. Not combat armor, but the ceremonial kind worn for official visits. It took Dae-sung a moment to recognize him without the crimson helmet. The commander, the warrior he had fought and stolen from. What are you doing here? Taesung asked, tensing despite himself. Diplomatic mission. Talks of ceasefire between Krevtar Empire and your coalition. The commander's standard language had improved, but I requested to meet the human warrior who survived the grinder. Who took my helm? He walked to stand beside Daesung, looking at the memorial wall. Your packmates. The ones who died in the ravine. My squad? Daesung corrected. Yes. The commander was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his uniform and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a Krevtar blade. Not a combat weapon, but a ceremonial one with intricate engravings along the blade. In Krevtar culture, the commander said, we honor fallen warriors with gifts. This blade belonged to my first combat instructor. It represents knowledge passed from warrior to warrior. I place it here for your packmates. They died with courage against impossible odds. That deserves recognition. He placed the blade at the base of the memorial wall, leaning it against the stone below the 23 names. It was the highest honor one warrior could pay to fallen enemies. Daesung stared at the blade, not sure what to say. You killed them. We killed each other. That is war. The commander looked at him. But your coalition abandoned them. Left them to die without support. That is not war. That is betrayal. Yes, Daesung said simply. It was. Your species is strange to us, the commander continued. Other species, when defeated, accept death. Surrender with honor. But humans, he shook his head. You do not know how to quit. You survive when you should die. You fight when you should flee. You carry a stolen helmet 30 kilometers through wasteland while your body fails. This is not rational behavior. No, Daesung agreed. It is not rational. It is human. The commander made that rumbling laugh Daesung remembered from their first meeting. When this war ends, and it will end soon, humans will be remembered. Not as the weakest species, not as expendable soldiers, but as the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy, because you refuse to understand the concept of defeat. He paused, then added, I have fought many species in my life, strong ones, fast ones, intelligent ones. But humans are the only ones that make me feel fear, because strength and intelligence have limits. But your stubbornness? That has no limit at all. Is that why you brought me to the border? Daesung asked. Instead of taking back your helmet and finishing me, I brought you to the border because you earned the trophy through warrior spirit. Killing you after that would be dishonorable. The commander looked at the memorial wall again. Also, I wanted your coalition to see what they abandoned. Wanted them to understand the mistake of underestimating human determination. He turned to leave, then paused. Your packmates died well, human. And you honored them by surviving. That is warrior philosophy. Remember the dead by living with purpose. After the commander left, General Im found Daesung still standing at the memorial. She looked at the Krevtar blade with surprise. Did he really just place a ceremonial weapon at our memorial wall? He did, Daesung confirmed. Things are changing, she said. The Krevtar are pushing for ceasefire talks. They say the war is no longer worth the cost. Meanwhile, our coalition has restructured command to give human officers equal authority. Policies about expendable units have been completely rewritten, all because one stubborn corporal refused to die when ordered to. I was never ordered to die, Daesung said. I was just not expected to live. And that expectation was their mistake. She looked at him carefully. You have become a symbol, Sergeant. Every species in the coalition is talking about what happened. Some are terrified, some are inspired, but none of them will underestimate humans again. I just wanted to survive, Daesung said quietly. I did not ask to be a symbol. No one asked for it. But symbols matter in war. They matter in politics. Right now you represent human capability to every species watching. She paused. I have an offer for you. We are forming a new unit, elite soldiers who have proven themselves in impossible circumstances. The kind of situations that should kill anyone but sometimes do not. What kind of unit? One that specializes in the impossible. Deep operations. High-risk missions. The kind of assignments that require soldiers who refuse to quit no matter what. She smiled slightly. We are calling it the No Man's Land Regiment. Seemed appropriate. Daesung thought about it. He could take a safe assignment. Desk work, training new recruits. After what he had been through, no one would question it. But that felt wrong somehow. His squad had died doing impossible things. They deserved to be remembered by someone continuing their work. If I join, he said slowly, I want one condition. Name it. No one gets left behind. Ever. I do not care how dangerous the extraction is. I do not care what it costs. We do not abandon our people. General Im nodded. That is already our first operational rule. No soldier under my command will ever be listed as acceptable losses again. I made that mistake once. Trusted alien command to value human lives appropriately. That mistake killed your squad and almost killed you. It will not happen again. She extended her hand. So, are you in? Dae-sung looked at the memorial wall one last time. At the 23 names etched in stone, at the Krevter blade placed in honor. His friends were gone, but their memory could drive him forward, could give his survival meaning. I am in, he said, shaking her hand. Someone needs to make sure we never leave our people behind again. Over the following weeks, as Dae-sung trained with the new unit, his story continued spreading. In human bars across Coalition space, soldiers toasted the man who walked out of hell. In alien command centers, officers revised their assessments of human capabilities. In political chambers, diplomats used his survival as proof that humans deserved equal treatment. The Crimson Helmet was placed in a military museum, but holographic copies appeared everywhere. On recruitment posters, in training facilities, as a symbol of what humans could achieve when pushed past every reasonable limit. Young people across Earth and the colonies read about Corporal Han Dae-sung and decided to enlist. They wanted to be like him, wanted to prove that human determination could overcome any obstacle. Recruitment numbers jumped 30% in 6 months, but Dae-sung himself remained uncomfortable with the attention. He was not a hero in his own mind, just a soldier who had been too stubborn to die. The real heroes were buried in that ravine on Viridian 7, their bodies still lying where they had fallen. He requested permission to return there once. General Im approved it personally, sending a full honor guard. They recovered all 23 bodies and brought them home for proper burial. Dae-sung attended every funeral, standing silent as families grieved for sons and daughters who had died following orders. At Taemin's funeral, the squad leader's elderly father approached Dae-sung. The old man looked at him for a long moment, then embraced him without words. Just held him while both of them tried not to cry. My son wrote about you in his letters, the old man finally said. Said you were a good soldier, a good person. He would be glad you survived. Dae-sung was not sure about that, but he accepted the words anyway. At Jiwoo's service, her younger brother, barely 16, asked Dae-sung what his sister had been like in her final moments. Dae-sung told him the truth, that she had died trying to. 20 years after the grinder incident, Colonel Han Dae-sung sat in his office reviewing mission reports. Gray touched his hair now, and his body carried the weight of decades in military service. The wounds from that terrible day had healed into scars, but they still ached when the weather changed. The No Man's Land Regiment had grown from an experimental unit into one of the most respected forces in human military history. Every coalition member species knew their name, knew their reputation, knew that when the regiment deployed, impossible missions became possible. But success came with a price. Dae-sung had attended too many funerals over the years. Despite their skill and determination, not every mission ended well. Sometimes even the best soldiers died. The difference now was that nobody died forgotten or abandoned. Every loss was mourned, every name remembered. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Enter, he called. Major Oh Min-seok stepped in, one of the regiment's senior officers. He had joined 8 years ago after surviving a disaster that killed his entire platoon. Like Dae-sung, he had walked out of hell alone and emerged changed. Sir, we have a situation. There is a delegation here to see you. Krevtar Diplomatic Corps. Dae-sung raised an eyebrow. Relations with the Krevtar had been peaceful since the war ended, but visits were still unusual. Send them in. 3 Krevtar entered. The one in front wore ceremonial armor marked with rank insignias Dae-sung recognized as high military command, but it was the warrior's face that made him pause. Older now, more scars but unmistakable. The commander, the one whose helmet he had stolen 2 decades ago. War leader Drakmor, Dae-sung said, standing. He had learned the commander's name years ago from treaty documents. This is unexpected. Colonel Han Dae-sung, Drakmor replied in much better standard than before. You have risen far since we last met properly. I am pleased. What brings you here? Drakmor gestured to one of his companions who carried a wrapped object. I have come to collect something. and to give something in return. The companion unwrapped the object carefully. It was the crimson helmet, the one Daesung had taken all those years ago. Somehow it had been retrieved from the museum where it was displayed. "This belongs to you," Drakmor said. "You won it through warrior spirit. But I ask that you return it to me, not as surrender but as part of an exchange." "What kind of exchange?" Drakmor reached into his armor and pulled out a data pad. "The Krevtar Empire wishes to establish a joint training program with your No Man's Land regiment. Our warriors would learn human endurance techniques. Your soldiers would learn Krevtar combat methodology. We would share knowledge as equals." He paused. "Also, I wish to commission a memorial on Viridian 7 near your existing one for Krevtar warriors who died fighting humans during the war. I want our dead remembered beside yours, so future generations see that warriors on both sides fought with honor." Daesung stared at him. This was more than diplomacy. This was bridge building between former enemies. "Why?" he asked simply. "Because the galaxy is changing," Drakmor said. "New threats emerge. Species that do not understand honor or warrior codes. To face these threats, we need allies who understand what it means to never surrender. Humans understand this better than any species I have encountered." He gestured at the helmet. "That day you took this from me, I was humiliated, angry, but also impressed. You should have died 3 times over before reaching my base. Should have died 10 more times escaping, but you refused. That is a quality worth respecting, worth learning from." Daesung picked up the crimson helmet, feeling its weight. It had become a symbol over the years. Of survival, of determination, of what humans could accomplish against impossible odds. Giving it back felt like losing something important, but keeping it meant holding on to the past. On to anger and old wounds. Maybe it was time for something different. "I accept your proposal," Daesung said. "Joint training program. Memorial for your warriors, and you can have the helmet back. But I have conditions. Name them." The joint memorial includes names from both sides. Every soldier who died in that conflict, regardless of species. We honor all warriors equally." "Agreed. The training program is truly equal. No species treated as superior or inferior. We learn from each other with mutual respect." "Agreed. And finally," Daesung looked at the helmet one more time. "This helmet gets displayed in a joint museum. Half the year in Krevtar space, half in human space. As a reminder of what happened. Of the cost of seeing any species as expendable. So we never forget why equals matter." Drakmor was silent for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You honor the past while building the future. This is wisdom. I accept all conditions." They shook hands, human and Krevtar, former enemies now allies. The gesture was symbolic but powerful. 2 warriors who had fought each other 20 years ago now working together for something better. After the delegation left, Major O remained. "Sir, do you think this will work? Krevtar and humans training together?" "I do not know," Daesung admitted. "But it is worth attempting. We learned during the war that humans are not expendable. Now we teach the galaxy that no species should be considered expendable, that every warrior deserves respect and honor." He looked out the window at the training grounds where regiment soldiers practiced. Human determination combined with Krevtar discipline and honor. It could create something remarkable. Or it could fail spectacularly. Either way, they had to try. Later that evening, Daesung visited the memorial wall at the base. The same one where he had stood 20 years ago with the Krevtar blade placed in honor. More names had been added over the years. Soldiers from the regiment who had died completing impossible missions. Each name represented someone who refused to quit until death took the choice away. "I am getting old," he said to the memorial. "Soon it will be someone else's turn to lead. Someone else's job to make sure nobody gets left behind." He thought about Lieutenant Kim Da-eun, now Captain Kim. She had proven herself repeatedly over the past decade, had the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat that defined the regiment. She would make a good commander when his time came. The legacy would continue. The No Man's Land regiment would keep operating. Keep proving that humans specialized in the impossible. Keep honoring those who had died by making sure their sacrifice meant something. Daesung's communications device buzzed. Emergency alert. A mining colony in the outer system was under attack by raiders. Normal military response would take 6 hours to reach them. 6 hours might be too long, but the No Man's Land regiment could deploy in 30 minutes. Could reach the colony in 3 hours if they pushed their ships past safe limits. could attempt a rescue that other units would consider too risky. He activated the alert. All personnel immediate deployment. We have civilians in danger. Within 20 minutes the regiment was assembled and boarding ships. Captain Kim approached for final orders. Rules of engagement? She asked. Standard protocol. Get the civilians out. No one left behind. Daesung paused, then added, and remember what we fight for. Not glory. Not medals. We fight so that nobody experiences what happened in the grinder. So that no soldier, no civilian, nobody gets abandoned when they need help most. Kim saluted. Understood, sir. We will bring them home. The ships launched into the dark. Daesung watched them go, feeling the weight of command. Some of those soldiers might not come back. That was the reality of military service. But they would never be forgotten. Never be considered acceptable losses. Never be abandoned. That was the promise he had made 20 years ago in a blood-soaked ravine. The promise he had kept every day since. The promise the regiment would keep long after he was gone. In military academies across human space, instructors taught cadets about the grinder incident. About Corporal Han Daesung who refused to die when convenient. About the squad that was abandoned but not forgotten. About the crimson helmet that became a symbol of human determination. But more importantly, they taught the lesson behind the story. That humans succeeded not through superior strength or intelligence, but through absolute refusal to quit. Through caring about each other enough to never leave anyone behind. Through stubborn, stupid, magnificent determination to survive and help others survive. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not technology or weapons or wealth, but the simple, powerful idea that every life mattered. That no one should be expendable. That sometimes the impossible was just another word for difficult, and difficult was something humans specialized in. Young cadets listened to these lessons and felt inspired, felt like they could accomplish anything, felt proud to be human in a galaxy that had learned to respect them. In the Krevtar Empire, similar lessons were taught. About the warrior who lost his helmet but gained respect for humanity. About the importance of honoring all warriors regardless of species. About the strength found in alliances built on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. The galaxy was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but changing nonetheless. And it had started with one stubborn soldier refusing to die in a forsaken ravine. 3 hours later, Daesung received a message. The rescue operation was successful. All civilians extracted safely. Minor casualties among regiment personnel, but everyone alive. Mission accomplished, he allowed himself to feel relief. They had saved lives today, made sure nobody was left